The day that my grandmother died is the day that I became a man. I was 15. My grandmother had been in congestive heart failure probably since I was 10 or 12. Her heart was getting worse and worse, and of course there's a cure for congestive heart failure, which is just to drain the fluid and continue draining it. But the fluid around the heart taxes those muscles, and eventually they get weak and they give out. And it's a slow and a painful death. And my grandmother decided at some point that it was time to give up the ghost, probably when about 25% of her heart muscle was left, is what they said. At that point, I was staying with my grandmother pretty much every day. I saw her at the hospital every day, and I took up um, I took up gifts to the hospital on Christmas. My grandmother was so sick for a long time, but she always managed to be out for Christmas or for all the holidays, really. And I guess it was the beginning of the end when we decided that, I don't know, it was just a symbol. And I remember walking up there in a green corduroy shirt and my Sunday best, hot as heck, because I was carrying a big old garbage bag on my back, and I walked 16 blocks, and I was in a green corduroy shirt. And even in December here in Texas, that don't really mean anything. And and I gave her her gifts, and she smiled, and she opened them. I was staying with her pretty much every day by then. People would come in the hospital to visit her. One lady, um, her name was Shirley, and Shirley is the cutest woman that ever lived. Shirley has these big buck teeth in the front of her mouth like this, and she looks sort of like a little oh, I don't know, some kind of Disney character. She's just got huge eyes and big teeth and this little voice that's like, you can't even begin to sound like her. There's nobody like Shirley. And Shirley is a secretary for my godparents, or for the people I call my godparents. They're really close friends of the family. Shirley is the bookkeeper there for the plumbing company that my godparents own. My grandmother used to be a bookkeeper there too. It really wasn't the fact that they needed two bookkeepers. My grandmother was there because she was a nurse, and my grandmother had cancer and could no longer keep the schedule of a nurse. But she was about 50 at the time, and having had one of those menopause babies, she still had a kiddo at home that was 13, 14, my uncle. I ended up staying with my grandmother every day after she got out of the hospital for about 2 or 3 weeks. Hospice demanded that she have a on-call caregiver at all times, and and it just seemed like some of the adults couldn't or wouldn't take care of her. Even my mom. I never understood it. I think it was denial, really. Maybe the fact that if they didn't stay with her, it was less real. If they didn't have to see it every day, the constant decline, that it really wasn't happening. I don't know. In my house, there was my mother and there was my grandmother. My grandmother didn't actually live in the house, but her presence was always in the house. My mother is the black sheep of the family. And my mother has a perfect love for me and a perfect trust that is beyond compare. I promise you that if I killed 3 people in a store and was on videotape, and then I took one of those disposable cameras and took pictures of myself committing the murders, and I left behind blood and hair and saliva and semen, and the police went to my mother and said, Rhonda, David has done killed these 3 people, my mother would come to me and ask me, and if I said no, she would go back to those police and tell them that they were a damn lie, and she would believe every word of it. Because, I don't know, because anything I say is gospel. And it's an unconditional love that I have that almost no one else I know has. And it's wonderful and it's beautiful, and I don't think it's enough to raise a kid. Like any other kid, I needed rules, I needed structure. And although my mom's not very good at that, my grandmother has rules and structure for miles. Well, I guess I told you those stories to tell you this. One day, my rules and structure had broken down. They were in the hospital bed, and they were being visited by my grandmother's friend, Shirley. And Shirley asked to speak with me, or I offered to walk her down to her car. I'm not sure exactly how it happened, but Shirley looked at me with that sweet face and said, in the 1970s, your grandmother had breast cancer, and we were very good friends, and she used to pray to God every night and say, please don't take me because I have this boy at home. And today, she has heart disease, and she prays every night, please don't take me because I have this boy at home, and she means you. And the only way to get her to go is to prove to her that you can take care of yourself. And so I was 15, I didn't know what to do, and I didn't want to lose my grandmother. And so I started thinking about all the things that I could do, all the things that I was good at. And I can't really do much, but I sing. And so I sang. I went to little country churches and I sang hymns, old hymns and new hymns, and hymns I didn't know the words to, and I would hum and I would dance on stage. I was so nervous. And I would itch. I would itch uncontrollably. And I hated it. And she would come to some of the concerts and her eyes would light up. And her face would be a beacon of light. And I don't even think there were lights in any of those rooms. They were just lit up by her smile. And she was proud of me. You know, I guess my mother's pride and my grandmother's pride were 2 different things. They still are. Um, I could do anything. I could kill somebody and my mother would be proud of me. But my grandmother, it just seemed like maybe she was only proud of me sometimes. Maybe she was only proud of me when I did something really great. And maybe the way I knew I'd done something really great is when Grandma was proud. And so I sang in those churches. And one day I got a check for $321 for about 15 minutes of singing. My grandmother was dead in 2 weeks.